The first thing I noticed was the fear in her eyes. It wasn't the kind of fear people show after a loud noise or an unexpected accident. It was older than that, deeper than that. It was the kind of fear that had learned to stay silent. As she brushed past me in the crowded train station, her trembling lips barely moved before the words escaped in a whisper that almost disappeared beneath the noise of rolling luggage and hurried footsteps. "Pretend you know me." Those 4 words stopped time. Before I could even understand what was happening, she wrapped her shaking arm around mine and forced a weak smile onto her face, while somewhere behind us, someone was watching. I had no idea that the next few minutes would shatter everything I believed about strangers, courage, and the incredible power of one small decision. I had always considered myself an ordinary man living an ordinary life. Every weekday followed the same routine. I woke before sunrise, drank coffee that had long since lost its ability to excite me, and caught the morning train into the city where I worked as an accountant. Numbers made sense to me because they followed rules. Life, on the other hand, rarely did. After losing both of my parents within 3 years, I had slowly withdrawn from the world, convincing myself that keeping my head down was the safest way to survive. I smiled politely at neighbors, exchanged small talk with coworkers, and avoided anything that looked like trouble. It was easier that way. At least, that's what I believed until that cold November morning. The station was packed with commuters moving like a river that never stopped flowing. Everyone looked busy, distracted, and eager to reach wherever they were going. No one noticed the woman walking quickly through the crowd except me. She looked exhausted, her dark coat wrinkled, her hair slightly messy, and her face carried bruises she had tried unsuccessfully to hide with makeup. When she reached me, she slipped her hand through my arm so naturally that anyone watching would assume we had known each other for years. Her heartbeat was so fast that I could almost feel it through her sleeve. Without turning my head, I noticed a tall man standing several yards away. He wasn't shouting or running. He simply watched us with cold patience, as though waiting for the right moment. Something inside me, something I thought had disappeared long ago, told me not to let go of her arm. I smiled awkwardly, pretending everything was normal. We started walking together through the station while she leaned slightly against me, still shaking. I quietly asked if she was in danger. She nodded almost invisibly. She told me the man had been following her since dawn and that she had escaped only because she slipped into the crowded station. She believed he was her former boyfriend, a man she had finally left after years of emotional and physical abuse. She had reported him before, but every time he somehow found her again. Today, she feared, would be the day he finally cornered her. I wanted to tell her that she should call the police immediately, but I could hear the panic in her breathing. She wasn't asking me to solve her life. She was asking me for something much smaller, something almost unbelievably simple. She wanted me to help her look like she wasn't alone. We kept walking, speaking quietly about ordinary things that didn't matter. We talked about coffee shops, rainy weather, and trains running late, all while my eyes searched every reflection in every window. The man remained behind us, never getting too close, never disappearing completely. My heart pounded harder with every step, but I kept reminding myself that if she had trusted a complete stranger with her safety, the least I could do was stay calm. Eventually, we reached a small cafe inside the station. The bright lights and busy tables offered some comfort. As soon as we stepped inside, I discreetly informed one of the employees that the woman beside me believed she was being followed and needed help. Within minutes, station security had quietly arrived. They watched the entrance carefully while one officer spoke with her in a private corner. When the man eventually entered the cafe, he was immediately approached by security. His calm expression vanished, replaced by anger that confirmed everything she had feared. Soon afterward, police officers arrived to question him while she sat silently, tears rolling down her face, overwhelmed not by fear anymore but by relief. I expected that to be the end of our story. I assumed we would exchange awkward goodbyes and never see each other again. Instead, before leaving with the officers, she turned toward me with eyes filled with gratitude and simply thanked me for believing her when no one else had. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to normal. Yet something inside me had changed. I couldn't stop thinking about that morning. I realized how close I had come to walking away, pretending not to hear her whisper. I wondered how many desperate people crossed our paths every day while we stared at our phones, too distracted to notice silent cries for help. One afternoon, a handwritten envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside was a letter from the woman, whose name I finally learned was Emily. She explained that the police had gathered enough evidence to arrest her former boyfriend for violating protective orders and multiple previous assaults. She was finally safe. She also wrote something I would never forget. She said that when she looked around the station that morning, I was the only person who looked kind instead of hurried. She admitted she had chosen me based on nothing more than a feeling she couldn't explain. I read that sentence over and over again. For years I had believed that my quiet life made little difference to anyone. Yet someone had trusted me with the most important moment of her life simply because I looked approachable. That realization stayed with me long after I folded the letter away. The months that followed became the beginning of a transformation I never expected. Instead of avoiding people, I started volunteering at a local shelter that helped survivors of domestic violence rebuild their lives. I wasn't a counselor or a therapist. I simply organized donations, served meals, repaired broken furniture, and listened whenever someone wanted to tell their story. I met women who had escaped impossible situations, children learning how to smile again, and volunteers whose compassion reminded me that kindness is often built from ordinary people making ordinary choices every single day. Emily occasionally visited the shelter as well. She had decided to mentor other survivors who felt hopeless during the first terrifying months after leaving abusive relationships. Every time she shared her story, she reminded people that courage doesn't always look like fighting. Sometimes courage is asking for help from a stranger. Watching her regain confidence was like watching spring arrive after an endless winter. She laughed more freely. She stood taller. The fear that once lived permanently in her eyes slowly disappeared, replaced by quiet strength. Her healing inspired countless others, including me. One evening, after finishing another volunteer shift, I confessed to her that I still felt guilty. I admitted how close I had come to ignoring her that day because I didn't want to get involved. She smiled gently and told me something that completely changed my understanding of courage. She said bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's deciding that another person's safety matters more than your own comfort. Those words became a compass for the rest of my life. Years later, I accepted a position managing outreach programs for organizations supporting abuse survivors. The accountant who once spent every evening alone now spent his days helping strangers find hope. I wasn't extraordinary. I hadn't performed a heroic rescue. I had simply chosen not to look away. Sometimes people ask me why I changed careers so dramatically. They expect a complicated explanation, but the truth always begins with 4 whispered words inside a crowded train station. Every meaningful chapter of my life can be traced back to that single moment. Even today, whenever I stand in a busy public place surrounded by hundreds of strangers, I wonder what invisible battles people are carrying. The smiling businessman might be grieving someone he lost yesterday. The exhausted mother might be hiding fears no one can see. The teenager sitting alone might simply need someone to acknowledge their existence. We rarely know the stories unfolding around us, and that's exactly why kindness matters. The greatest miracles are not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes they arrive disguised as small decisions. Holding a door open. Listening without judgment. Believing someone who is afraid. Offering a few minutes of your time when every excuse tells you to keep walking. Those moments may seem insignificant to us, but to someone else they can become the turning point between despair and hope. There are still days when I think about the version of myself who almost ignored that whisper. If I had chosen convenience instead of compassion, 2 lives might have followed completely different paths. Emily might have remained trapped in fear a little longer. I might have continued living behind emotional walls, convinced that my life existed only for routines and responsibilities. Instead, one stranger gave another stranger the opportunity to become the person he was always capable of being. If this story has stayed with you, carry its lesson into the next ordinary moment of your own life. You never know when a simple act of kindness may become someone else's reason to believe that the world still has good people in it. And if you ever hear a quiet voice asking for help, remember that sometimes the smallest response can create the biggest change. The world is not transformed only by heroes. More often, it is transformed by ordinary people who choose compassion when it would be easier to walk away. That day began with fear hidden inside a whisper. It ended by changing 2 lives forever. Mine was one of them. I still hear those words whenever life gives me the chance to help someone else. Pretend you know me. I no longer think of them as a request from a frightened stranger. I think of them as the moment fate quietly reminded me that every human life is connected in ways we may never fully understand, and that sometimes the greatest purpose we will ever discover begins with choosing to care.